let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome and welcome back to Cafe Oleh. My name is Jay. Here at Cafe Oleh with Nefesh B'Nefesh, we go over the everyday modern Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's reading and paying your bills, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, keeping up with the news, striking up a conversation, flirting, dating, complaining, job interviewing, all the everyday things you do with your native language in your country of origin, but here in Israel in modern Hebrew. As always, we'd like to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can always be in touch with us by email at hebrew@nbn.org.il. That's HEBREW at nbn.org.il. You can also see all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Oleh. The very first result that you'll see is a truncated playlist of all of our previous lessons. You click on view full playlist, you'll get 126 videos right now with close to 19,000 views. Review all of our previous lessons. The last 50 or 60 or so come with the vocabulary spreadsheets that we use as the basis of each of our classes. You can also comment on our videos there. If you're joining us live on Zoom, you can write to us in the chat with any questions, comments, concerns, and most importantly, requests for topics. We want Cafe Oleh to be as user-focused and as user-friendly as possible, so we rely on you to give us topics. That being said, folks, please review our YouTube channel. We have, as I said, 126 lessons up there. Many times we do review on our own. We realize that we haven't done a topic in a while or that there isn't a spreadsheet involved. One of the most requested topics, and I promise you folks, we've done it now, I think 4 times, are medical terms and how to make an appointment. We've approached it in multiple ways without disclosing my personal medical file and yours. So please review. There are a lot of great classes up there. There are a lot of great classes we haven't yet done, but please take a minute, look at the full course, full list of courses that we've done in the past, and always be in touch with us with further comments or further things you'd like us to cover. Today, so we are going to do a little bit of a review, which is as much based on requests that we've gotten to cover this topic again, as it is an important one to go over, because this is one of those things that separates one language from another, which is the building blocks of a language. We certainly will talk more and more about nouns, verbs, and adjectives, basics of any language, but today we're going to talk about 2 topics, or actually a couple topics, that if you don't remember your grammar, your studies of the English grammar or other languages, these words may sound long and scary. We're going to talk today about conjunctions and prepositions and prefixes and suffixes. Don't let that freak you out. You're going to understand everything we do. We're going to break it into 2 sections. You're going to have 2 different spreadsheets that will be sent to you after this class and will be attached to this lesson when it goes up on YouTube. Those of you who are joining us for Wednesday's Cafe Oleh Conversations, remember that our Monday class is a frontal class. We're currently at 285 participants, which is absolutely amazing, and thank you all for joining us, but we can't turn on 285 cameras. Understandably, there's only 2 of us here on this call monitoring it and running it, so we thank you for your cooperation in that respect. But our Wednesday class is a conversation-based class, and you're going to be using some of the vocabulary we go over, and more importantly, where we put conjunctions and prepositions and the prefixes and suffixes in forms, and you're going to be able to practice it with each other. If that sounds interesting, go to our website on the Cafe Oleh page on Nefesh B'Nefesh. You'll be able to sign up as well. It'll also be in the chat shortly. So with that, let's start looking at what I'm talking about, because this often trips up people who are learning Hebrew to no end and have lots of questions, and that's what I hope we're going to at least provide you with a good cheat sheet today to move forward. Okay, let me get some of these boxes out of the way. So as always, our spreadsheet, you're welcome to cut and copy. You're welcome to old school pen and paper. You're also welcome to just follow along. You'll get a copy of this PDF in the next day. So what we have here is a list of everyday prepositions. Not all these are going to be prepositions. Those of you who are a little bit more phonetic with your grammar, please don't come after me. These are just grouped together, and you'll understand why in a little bit. And we're also going to get into conjunctions as well. Okay, but what we're doing here, as always, is we have our columns for Hebrew, we have our transliteration on the right, we have our English on the left, and what we also have here is very important when we're talking about conjunctions and prepositions in Hebrew, which is, does it have a prefix form? And I'll explain that in a second. And does it take an object pronoun suffix? In Hebrew, we've talked about this multiple times. Hebrew's aesthetic, Hebrew's jam, is the smaller the word and the more concise the word, the better. How does that manifest? Well, first off, Hebrew naturally doesn't have long words and multisyllabic words. That's almost always an indication that a word is of foreign origin. It's a cognate, or it's adopted from another language, turned Hebraicized, however you want to think of it, but it's typically not a native Hebrew word. What Hebrew has the capacity to do is turn words and turn things that would otherwise take a couple words to mush them further together by adding a prefix or suffix. Basically, if you don't remember what that is, a prefix is a letter or letters that comes at the beginning of a word. Suffix is a letter or letters that come at the end of a word. So for example, in English, if the verb, if the infinitive verb is to run, running is the gerund, is the act of doing running, right? The act of run. ing is considered a suffix, right? That would be a suffix. Board, B-O-A-R-D. You can pre-board a plane, for example. Pre, P-R-E, is a prefix. Okay, that's as simple as it is in English. Hebrew does the same thing, and it does it with specific types of words, and you're going to see some of those examples today. So first off, sorry, just 1 second. There we go. Okay. First off, let's talk about one that you'll hear all the time. And some of these you're going to know as the prefix. Some of these you probably didn't know was an actual word. And that's going to be really important to understand the difference when you're going to use it as a prefix or when you're going to use the full word. Asher. Asher, when we're talking about prepositions and conjunctions, articles of speech, asher or asher, however you say the letter resh, means that or which. Okay? Many of you know the word asher by its prefix, she, right? Shamati sheyesh baya babayit hayom. I heard there's a problem at home. Shamati sheyesh baya babayit. That she as a prefix to yesh, I heard that there is a problem at home. Okay? Instead of saying Shamati asher yesh baya babayit, we say Shamati she yesh baya babayit. Why do we do that? For two reasons. One, she asher. We've talked about this before. It's always going to be important. When you have the choice of meaning the exact same thing, and one option is fewer syllables than the other, the fewer syllables will always win in modern Hebrew. Okay, so asher is 2 syllables, she is 1. The second reason is asher is very formal Hebrew. There are only going to be so many times in an everyday conversation that you're going to both hear and use asher instead of simply saying she. Okay, she is going to be a prefix you're going to use all the time, that or which. Okay. Next one. This one is a odd one for many native English speakers because we don't really have a word that is similar to it. Etzel. Etzel means at, is the easiest way to think about it. At. You may hear certain communities of Orthodox Jews use the word by in English, by. I am eating by so-and-so's house. They're translating from the Hebrew to English, the etzel, they're translating as by, meaning the same thing. I'm eating at someone's house. They'll translate as I'm eating by someone's house. It's the same word in Hebrew, etzel. It's the closest equivalent is the French word chez, C-H-E-Z, chez moi, etzli. Okay. Now, etzel does not have a prefix, but it does take the object pronoun suffix. Don't get freaked out by these three words that you probably don't ever hear, let alone as one word, okay? Etzli, etzlecha, etzlech, etzlo, etzla. What happens with some of these prepositions is that we add the object pronoun suffix. This is me, or to you, or to him, or to her, and so forth. Okay? If I were to say etzli, that would mean at my place, or in the French, chez moi, right? At my place. Etzli yesh mazgan chazak. At my house, there is a strong or a very powerful air conditioner. Okay, that's what etzli means. At me, by me, in me, in the sense of usually my home. Sometimes it can also mean personally, mood-wise. For example, there's a very famous song in Israeli culture, Etzli hakol beseder, right? Everything's good with me. Everything's okay with me. It's not a literal translation with me. It's saying with me as in inside me. With all the different aspects of everything I'm going through, everything's okay. That's what that means when we're talking about etzli. If I said, for example, a common question when you are asking someone how their weekend was. איך עבר הסופש? How did your weekend go by? Or how did your weekend pass, literally? And they answer, or you answer, and then you say, Uma etzlecha, you would say to a man, Uma etzlech, to a female. And how about with you, or by you, or at you, right? What's with you in terms of what you did this weekend? Okay, that's what etzel means. We usually refer to it in a physical sense, at someone's house, at someone's blank physical space. Okay. By the way, if those of you who are new or have forgotten, if you have questions about the topic I'm going over tonight, or any questions as I'm going, please write it in the Q&A. Anything that's written in the chat, I will only be looking at tomorrow at the transcript. So if it's something about this specific class or a question in general about Hebrew, if you have the time, please write it in the Q&A only. Another preposition, bein. Bein is between. And this one also can take an object's pronoun suffix. A lot of these will be able to do that. Beini, between me. Beincha, between you, right? Beini uveincha, between me and you, blah, blah, blah. Okay? Beini uveincha yesh haskama, right? Between me and you, there's an agreement. That's how we would use this. Bli. Bli is one of a few words we have in Hebrew that means without. This word, however, is going to be important because this word, it does take the object pronoun suffix, but it changes a little in the form. And it turns into, if I wanted to say without me, I would say bil adai. Okay? If I want to say without you, masculine, singular, bil adecha. Female, bil adech, or a very famous Israeli song, bil adaich. That aich at the end is the same thing as ech. We can get into that in a little bit if people have questions. Bil adav, bil adeha, bil adenu, and so forth. Many dictionaries in the back of their as a reference guide will often have a whole chart of all these declensions and conjugations. I want to put them all in one table, but also understanding not only what they mean, but if they come with a prefix, because they wouldn't necessarily be in that. Bishvil means for. Okay, F-O-R. Bishvili, bishvilcha, for me, for you. You don't have to use an object's pronoun suffix with all of these, but sometimes you do. Sometimes, if, for example, if the object is known, it's not a pronoun. So, for example, Bishvil hamedina ani mitnadev kol shavua. For the country's sake, I volunteer each week, right? I'm not saying for her, meaning Medina, because I'm specifying what I'm talking about here, right? But if it's understood, if I'm replying directly to something, I can say bishvila or bishvilo or any of the other declensions of these. Okay, This one is going to throw some of you off because you've learned up till now, probably in Ulpan or day school or yeshiva or university, that in order to say the equivalent of in English or within, you use the prefix be. Or if you're trying to say in the something, ba. Right? So if I wanted to say in the school, I would say ba beit sefer or ba beit hasefer. If I wanted to say in the house, ba bait. Right? In a house would be bebait. Right? However, be as a prefix is short for the word betoch. Betoch really should be understood to mean within. And why do I make that difference? Because if be is in, betoch is within. The difference is minuscule, but the usage is great in that you're almost always going to use be as a prefix, meaning in. Very rarely are you going to use betoch. Betoch is only going to be used both in formal settings and also when you're really trying to emphasize something is within something. Betoch tochi yesh trusha shel tikva. Deep inside me, deep within me, there's a feeling of hope. That's how you would use betoch. But in everyday language, you're just going to use the prefix be or ba if it's in the. Okay, and just like our other prepositions, betoch is going to conjugate. Betochi, betochecha, betochech. You're not going to use this word a lot. You're going to need to recognize it, but you're not going to use it a lot. Instead, you're going to use the prefix. This is one where you're going to use both. As or like in Hebrew is kimo. Kimo is also in a prefix. Ke or ka. Like or ka, like the. Okay. Kimo does have object pronoun suffix. It does take it. Kamoni, kamocha, kamoch, kamonu, kamoha, and so forth. Kamohu, kamoha, kamonu, and so forth. But you're often going to use ke. Okay. Liad. Liad is next to. Liadi, liadcha, next to me. Liadcha, next to you, masculine. Liadech, next to you, feminine, and so forth. Mul is facing or against. Muli, facing me. Mulcha, facing you, and so forth. Min. Min is also one, you're not going to use min a whole lot. Mem nun, to mean from. You probably recognize this word in other settings perhaps, but you're not going to use it on an everyday basis. You are, however, going to use the prefix me. Okay. Me haaretz, from the land. Right? Instead of min haaretz, from the land, means the exact same thing, but in modern Hebrew, like I said, you're going to use the prefix me much more. Min does take the object pronoun suffix, so mimeni, from me, mimcha, from you, mimech, from you, feminine, and so forth. Al. Al means on, about, or upon. Okay, we're going to talk about this specific preposition in a few weeks' time when we talk about commands. But al is one that you're going to hear all the time. This one also takes the suffix alai, on me, alecha, on you, alech, on you, feminine, alav, on him, aleha, feminine, aleinu, on us, and so forth. Im. Im is going to be a tricky one. Okay, im means with, but when this one takes the suffix, it's also going to change. It's not imi, it's iti. Iti with me, itcha with you masculine, itach with you feminine, ito, ita, itanu, itchem, itchen, itam, itan. Okay? This one changes a little bit, but it's important to recognize it because this one you will hear with. And then finally, one I know many of you are very familiar with, shel. Shel means of. When we add the object pronoun suffix, it becomes the possessive. Sheli literally translates to of me, but we translate it as my. right? Shelcha, of you, object, right? But instead of saying of you, you just say your. Shalach, shelo, shela, shelanu, shelchem, shelachen, shelahem, shelahen. Okay? These are the major ones you're going to use in terms of prepositions. In addition to that, we have one that's a tricky one. This one I purposely put in a separate one, and this one's going to have some example sentences because this one gets a little tricky, which is el. El means to or towards, versus the prefix le means to or for. That may sound pedantic, but it is an important difference. El is always going to be followed by an object or the object pronoun suffix. Elai, elecha, elech, and so forth. Elav, eleha, elenu, and so forth. To or towards. Versus if you want to say to or for, you're going to do le as a prefix. Li, lecha, lach, lo, la, and so forth. Here's the difference. The exact same words. The only difference is, did I use el or did I use the prefix le? Two different meanings in Hebrew. Ima shalcha lecha et chavila. Ima, mom, mother. Shalcha, sent. Lecha. Lecha means here not just to you, but specifically for you. Okay? That's a really important distinction. Sent for you, et chavila, the package, right? It's et chavila. We use et before a direct object. The direct object here is chavila. Okay? Mom sent the package for you, lecha. Ima shalcha lecha et chavila, meaning I live at home with a whole bunch of other people, including perhaps siblings. But the package that mom arrived, and perhaps she's my mom too, is specifically for you, lecha, masculine. Okay? Versus elecha. These cannot be swapped because they mean different things. Same sentence, exact same scenario. We only swapped out the lecha for elecha. Ima shalcha elecha et chavila. Mom sent the package to you. Now, for you versus to you in this context, again, may seem pedantic, may seem like, Jay, what are you going on about here? But there is a difference, right? Ima shelcha lecha et chavila. Mom sent this package for you, meaning this package and its contents are for your use. Versus ima shalcha elecha et chavila. Mom sent the package to you, but it's not necessarily for you. Right? She sent it to you maybe because she has your address, but the contents aren't necessarily for you because it's not lecha. It's just elecha. The direction is to you or towards you. That's why that towards up here in row 16 is so important. Okay? Two words that often get mushed together because in English, it would be all too easy to translate these both as to, but they don't mean to. One is to in the sense of towards, meaning direction, and one is to in the sense of for, possession. Okay, el and le. Okay, you can't swap these two out. They do have an important distinction between them. Okay, why am I going on about these? And more importantly, why am I not giving a sample sentence for all these? Well, first off, that's what you're going to do in Wednesday's class. Second, I want you to be able to recognize these more than give you sample sentences. You're going to see sample sentences for conjugations, in a second. What I am going to show you now is something that's why this is important to go over, is because verbs in Hebrew, just like verbs in English and any other language, take prepositions. Right? They need some direction. After you state the action, you need to connect it to something. It needs to go in some sort of direction. Give me some more details. In English, for example, we get away with saying things that in other languages are more clarified. So for example, I'm sending you a message, is how we would say it in English. In many other languages, we would have to say the equivalent of I am sending to you a message, right? I send you a message is how we would say this in everyday English. The proper English is I send to you a message. We would never say that. But in other languages, you do, including Hebrew. So what we're going to look at now are some verbs, everyday verbs in Hebrew, that take prepositions you wouldn't necessarily expect them to do, because in English, it's either a direct object or you just would never think of it. And these are really important because oftentimes when we're learning a verb, we're not just learning how to conjugate it, we're also learning, okay, what comes after that verb? Is it to? Is it for? Is it by? Is it in? Is it out? What are we saying after this? What's help me, Jay? What's the preposition afterwards? This is where I'm going to give you a little bit of a cheat sheet of specifically verbs that don't do what English does, because let's face it, a lot of us have trouble learning other languages, or we think we do. I'm trying to take that alleviation away from you here. So, for example, in Hebrew, if you want to say I miss you, you can't say the direct translation in English, right? In English, I miss you, you is a direct object. In Hebrew, it is not. Instead, we say lehitgagea el. If I want to say I miss you, masculine singular, ani, I, mitgagea, present tense singular masculine, ani mitgagea, elecha. Remember up here, elai, elecha? This is where these conjunctions and these conjugations are going to be really important. These conjugations, excuse me. Ani mitgagea elecha, in Hebrew, using the preposition el, to or towards, is how we say in English, I miss you. Okay, that's an important difference you can't skip over because it happens to be different. Okay, so, אני מתגעגע אליך. אני מתפלל el whomever or whatever. I pray to or towards. That's closer to English. Okay, I pray to God. Same thing here. El, by the way, is not the Hebrew word God here. It's el as in to or towards as a preposition. To relate to something, ani mityaches el. Lehityaches el, to relate. Okay, to get connected, lehitchaber el. Okay, some of these make sense, right? To get connected to, or to relate to something. That makes sense. We would use the article el, right? The preposition el. Let's get to some that don't necessarily translate so easily from one language to another. To buy, right? If I want to say, I'm buying you a car, right? I'm buying you a car in American English is the everyday way to say, I'm buying a car for you. Right? And that's why in Hebrew, among other languages, it's liknot le, right? To buy for. Okay? You can say, I am buying a car. Don't worry. You can absolutely say, I am buying a car. Ani kone mechonit. I am buying a car. But if I want to buy something for someone, I have to use the preposition le. Ani kone lecha mechonit. I am buying a car for you, just like we had in the sample sentence above. This one doesn't make as much sense, to forgive. If you forgive someone, in English, we say, I forgive you, or I don't forgive you. Ani lo soleach lecha. In English, I don't forgive you. In Hebrew, ani lo soleach lecha. We use le followed by the object suffix. Okay, object pronoun suffix. Lisloach le, to forgive someone or something. Okay. And finally, to worry or to worry about, lidog le. If you say to a good friend, ani doeg lecha, it's both I worry about you, but I'm concerned about you. I want to take care of you. It's in a good sense that you doeg le, lidog le. Okay, to worry about someone. Let's go to some others that also are not necessarily so cut and dry. To take care of someone, letapel be. Okay, this doesn't translate as well from English to Hebrew and vice versa. In English, we say, I take care of you, or let me take care of you, or I want to take care of you. Of you is the preposition we're using. In Hebrew, it's be. Ani rotze, I want, litapel, to take care, becha, of you. Okay, we're using be, which I just taught you meant in or within, and then we're adding the object pronoun suffix at the end. Ani rotze litapel b'chaver sheli. I want to take care of my friend. Okay, that's how we would use this verb and the correct preposition afterwards. This one always trips people up. This is a verb we use all the time to use, right? We use to use all the time. But just as I said now in English, we use the verb to use. In Hebrew, you can't say that. It's not a direct object. Instead, it's ani mishtamesh ba'poal lihishtamesh. I use, in Hebrew, lehishtamesh be. Okay, it's followed by the preposition be as a prefix. And then finally, as an example, there are plenty more here that I didn't include. I only tried to include the ones that don't necessarily translate as well from one to another. There are plenty of others. There are plenty, by the way, that do exactly as they do in English. I just want to highlight the ones that are a little different. Is the verb lifgoa. Lifgoa means to hurt or to wound. And you're going to use be afterwards. Even if you hurt or wound someone directly, you're going to lifgoa bo. I wound him. Ani pogea bo. I wound him. Okay, that's how that translates. Okay, before we get to conjunctions, I have to do something that, again, is going to feel a little pedantic, maybe feel a little old-fashioned, but you are going to hear this in Hebrew, and it's really important. The rule that we're often taught about English, right? That you can't end a sentence with a preposition. In Hebrew, that's almost impossible. Why? Look at all these words here. They're either a prefix or they have an object pronoun suffix, which essentially makes them a full word, right? So we're not ending the word with a sentence with these, row D. We're instead ending them with row B, right? So ani mitgagea elecha is a perfectly good sentence. I miss you. Just like in English, I miss you is a perfectly good sentence. Even though el, right, is a preposition, that it has that suffix on it, it's considered a full word. It's not ending a sentence with a preposition. In Hebrew, it's not as big of a deal because it's almost impossible to end a sentence with a preposition without one of these suffixes attached to it. Once you add the suffix, you're negating that rule's existence. It doesn't work, right? The rule doesn't exist anymore because you've added this other article to it that's turned it into a full word in a full sentence. Okay. However, just like in English, if you want to ask a question and not have that preposition dangling at the end, you do exactly that. You switch it, push it to the beginning. Lemiata kone matana. For whom are you buying a present? Now I know whom and who trips everyone else up, and it sounds very fancy, but I use the word whom here to underscore the fact that, look how I said this. Me, mem yud, is how we say who, W-H-O in English. Limi, to whom or for whom, takes care of that otherwise dangling preposition after konen. Right? So if I want to ask the question, who are you buying a present for? As you would say in everyday informal English, who are you buying the present for? We know that in proper English, quote unquote proper English, for whom are you buying a present? We have to flip the words so that the preposition doesn't come at the end of the sentence, or question in this case. Same in Hebrew, but Hebrew, we don't have a choice. You can't say, because le is a prefix, it has to attach to something, right? It's very simple. Le has to attach to something. So lemi ata kone matana, for whom are you buying a present? Okay. First off, this is a question, so it has to come earlier. We're answering this question by saying the le, right? We're filling in the details with the le, and we're making sure it doesn't come at the end, because as a prefix, it can't just dangle out there. It has to attach to something. The only logical place it's going to attach to is the question itself, me, who. Another example, im mi ata medaber. Im mi ata medaber. With whom are you speaking? Like in English, ledaber, to speak, can be followed by im, with, or el, to, right? I speak to you, I speak with you. It's a difference in power, right? If I want to say, with whom are you speaking? You cannot say, and I'm going to say the incorrect thing so you can hear it and not try to prove me wrong in the questions here. You may not only may not, you shall not, you will not say in Hebrew, mi ata medaber im. That makes no sense, right? As a question, as a sentence, it doesn't make sense. But im mi ata medaber makes total sense in Hebrew. With whom are you speaking? Just like in English, with, im, mi, whom are you, ata medaber, speaking? Just like in English, so too in Hebrew. Let's look at another one. This one also is a prefix. Lema mitkaven. Lema mitkaven, what do you mean? What do you mean? Sorry, I need to enunciate here. What do you mean? Lema mitkaven. Mitkaven, lehitkaven means to mean something. M-E-A-N. And it's usually followed by the prepositional prefix le. Okay? Lema mitkaven, what do you mean? Right? You can't say ma mitkaven le. That makes no sense. Again, it's a prefix. It has to attach to something. The only thing it can attach to here is the question word ma, what. To what do you mean? Or what do you mean in simpler English? Or in even more simpler English, what do you mean? Okay. And finally, bema nifgata. Okay. What, where were you injured? You can also say efo nifgata using the question word where. Bema nifgata. Nifgati baregel. I was injured. My leg got injured. Okay, it's that verb to hurt or to wound in the passive sense, passive voice. Where were you injured? Bema nifgata. Because remember, the verb lifgoa is followed by the prepositional prefix be. Okay, if that didn't scramble your brain enough, and hopefully it did, because that's how we learn things, I gave you some sample sentences here. I gave you a graph here, a chart of all the different prepositions. I want to go through conjunctions. I know there's a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A. I want to go through conjunctions at the very least to show you the second half of the spreadsheet here, because these are really important as well. These are the basic parts of speech that when you're learning Hebrew also improve your communication skills. Remember, we talked a few weeks ago about improving your vocabulary and synonyms and other words to take place of always saying the equivalent of fine in English or tov in Hebrew. Same thing here. What we're going to look at now is a chart. We've gone through this before quite a while ago, and so it has sample sentences attached, but the idea here is, as you'll see, you have Hebrew everyday. Sorry, just waiting for that screen. There we go. You have Hebrew everyday conjunctions like or, and, but, when, because, for, and other ones. And then you have Hebrew upgraded. When there's a word that is upgradable in Hebrew, I'm going to add it here. And if it's got a prefix, it's also going to be there. There aren't going to be many in this case. And you're also going to get a sample sentence. So here you're really able to start working on things. So for example, or in Hebrew is simply o. Okay? את רוצה שאבשל או שאשטוף את הכלים? One other way you can say this sentence is, would you like me to either cook or wash the dishes? Just like in English, either and or, in Hebrew, we simply use the word again. את רוצה או, את רוצה או שאבשל או שאשטוף את הכלים? Would you like me to either cook or wash the dishes? Not cook the dishes, but you understand what I mean, right? To either cook or wash the dishes. Okay, that is the word or. O. The means and it's a prefix, right? It attaches to a word. The other thing that the closely related word is gam also. And in the Hebrew upgraded column, you'll see a whole bunch of other words you're going to come across. You may not use them yourself, but you will hear these words. Af, כמו כן, יתר על כן, נוסף על כך, מעבר לכך. These are all fancier ways to say and or also. גם אני רציתי ללכת לים ולאכול גלידה. I also want to go to the beach and have ice cream. Okay? As an example. We're just running out of time. I'm not going to be able to necessarily go through all these. I'm trying to go fast. But in Hebrew is aval. It can also be ach, and it can also be ela. Ela is also, it means unless, but rather unless. These are more everyday ones, more fancier, upgraded ones. Ulam with an aleph. בניגוד לכך, אני לא מעוניין, for example, the simple sentence, אני לא מעוניין במסעדה הזאת, I'm not interested in that restaurant, אלא אם יש אופציות לצמחוניים. Unless, אלא אם, unless there are options, אופציות לצמחונים, for vegetarians. Okay? כאשר, אחרי ש, לפני ש, לאחר, לפני. These are all timestamps. כאשר means when, אחרי, after, לפני, before, לאחר, afterwards, לפני, beforehand, right? And this one can be prefixed, the word כאשר, as kshet. Okay? I don't have, here it is. וכשאתה לבוש בהתאם, and when you are dressed appropriately, right? When the word when is not a question, but rather in a sentence, you can use the prefix kshet. A big one, because or due to. In Hebrew, the everyday expressions, and I know people learn all sorts of different things in various ulpanim with this. I'm gonna, as always, gonna try to break this down very simply. The two that you're gonna hear the most and use the most are ki and biglal. These both mean because or due to. In very fancy Hebrew, ki can mean for, F-O-R, but we're only talking about the words because or due to, ki or biglal. Biglal is always followed by a clause. Ki can be followed by a full sentence. There is no such thing in modern Hebrew as biglal she. There is, however, mipnei she, mishum she, laor, begin, heyot she, kevan she, beshel, ekev, beikvot, bischut, leregel, lenochach. You have lots of different ways to say because or due to. Chances are, however, you're only going to use one of these two, ki or biglal. התעכבתי לפגישה, I was late for the meeting, or I was delayed for the meeting, בגלל הפקקים מחוץ לבניין, because of the traffic outside of the building. Okay, notice, הפקקים מחוץ לבניין is not a sentence. The traffic outside the building is not a sentence in English, and it's not a sentence in Hebrew. It's a clause. בגלל is followed by a clause. Okay. If I want to use the word ki here, התעכבתי לפגישה כי היו פקקים מחוץ לבית. Because there were, היו פקקים מחוץ לבית. Traffic outside the house, outside the building, excuse me. For or in order to, כדי, bishvil, which we just talked about before, and almenat. These are the three you're going to hear the most. Really, it's going to be k'day and bishvil, sometimes even the preposition prefix le. L'shem kach, lema'an, pen, shema. You have all sorts of different ones here. If or had, if you want to say a conditional sentence in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, the ones you're going to hear the most are im, ilu, b'mikre she, or lu. You have all sorts of other ones, b'mikre shel, ilule, ilmale, ilu bitnai she, ela im ken. A lot of words here, okay? The idea here is to introduce you or reintroduce you to a grammatical topic like prepositions we just did, conjunctions here, and here, as opposed to prepositions, you have a lot more words to deal with, conjunctions, right? Despite or notwithstanding is lamrot or af al pishe in everyday Hebrew. Very fancy Hebrew is cheref, right? Lamrot balagan. This is a quote from a song we've translated together in Cafe Oleh. The song is called Ezo Medina, and the last line of the song goes, Lamrot balagan ve'achesronot at medinatenu ledore dorot. Despite, lamrot, despite, habalagan ve'achesronot, the chaos and the disadvantages, at medinatenu ledore dorot. You are our state, you are our country, referring to Israel, for generations to come. Okay, and then finally, leumat, as opposed to. You can also say masher, ve'ilu, leumatzot, be'ot. Okay, the idea though here is to reintroduce you again. Articles of speech that aren't verbs or nouns and adjectives, but are just as important in everyday speech. Sometimes, like in the prepositions, there's ways to condense them. Sometimes you have to elaborate. Here, you can not only use these everyday ones, you can even upgrade your Hebrew. And if this is scary, don't worry. It's going to take some time. It's the reason why I separate in this specific slide, spreadsheet rather, the everyday versus upgraded. Stick to the everyday. There's no need to be fancy. If you're not feeling fancy, stick with everyday. You'll be understood. The important part about communication, after all, is to be understood. Okay, we have a bunch in the Q&A. I'm going to start answering them. And before I get to the top of the hour, I'm going to tell you about next week's class. For those of you who need to already drop out, I'm actually going to do that now before we get to the Q&A in case you didn't have a question or you don't want to stick around for it. So first off, toda rabah. Thank you all for joining. I know this topic is a little heady for some people. It's a little too cerebral, talking straight up grammar. I hope you were able to make it a little bit more accessible this week. Next week, no grammar. I promise no grammar. Next week is going to be a audience request, a user request, and I'm really excited for this class. It's going to be on recurring jokes and memes in Israeli society. Basically, all the inside jokes that it seems everyone in Israel knows or recognizes. Maybe it's a jingle, maybe it's a song, maybe it's a phrase that everyone seems to know and you don't. You can be the most fluent of Hebrew speakers, but if it's not grounded in a specific society, you won't necessarily know the words, right? So we're going to look at it next week. There are a lot of great examples. If you have examples of inside jokes or recurring jokes or memes that you've come across that you want some help with, send them to us. I'm still collecting a lot of different ideas here for next class. Send it to us by email, hebrew@nbn.org.il. And this Wednesday's Cafe Oleh conversation is going to practice a lot of these words we just went through, both the prepositions and the conjunctions. If you're really looking to master your Hebrew understanding as well as speaking skills, join us this Wednesday. Okay, with that, I'm going to get to the Q&A. This is your last chance. If you wrote a question to me about this class in the chat, write it in the Q&A. Okay. What advances people who know 100 words in Hebrew plus knows the alphabet and vowels? 100 more words, as well as knowing all the different verbs in past, present, and future tenses, knowing the active versus passive forms of verbs. There's a lot of ways to advance, but certainly 100 words in Hebrew, you got to learn more. Hebrew has about 35,000 words that are original words that aren't compound words. So a lot more words to learn. That alone will advance you far. I wish they would tell us the topic in advance. I do. You got to stick around to the end of the class or watch the recording of the previous week, because I always tell you what the next week's class is. But thanks for letting us know. And you can direct things to me. There's no they, it's just me, and it's Nefesh B'Nefesh, but thanks. Is etzel only used in relation to a location? Like I said, etzli hakol beseder. Everything's good with me, is how we would translate that. Etzli literally means by me or at me. In a physical sense, but we're really talking emotionally there. Most of the time, however, etzel is going to be used in terms of a location. Absolutely. So basically, the prefix form takes the place of the preposition, just in a shortened form, 100%. Simple as that. How do I make the sheet bigger? Can't read it. You're getting your own copy of it as soon as this class's recording goes up on YouTube. You will get a link to it. You can make it as big as you'd like. Etzel is like saying, how's by you? That's a good way to say it, right? Umatzlecha, how's by you? What's by you? That's a way to think about it. Great. Can bilad mean only? So great question. Let me get back to our sheet here. Sorry, just a second. I need to open it up. There we are, prepositions. So I just taught you, right, that if you want to say without me, without you, and so forth, it's biladai, biladecha, right? Biladi is a totally separate word, which means exclusive. Let me write it all the way down here. Sorry for the size. I'll make it bigger in a second. And this means come on, English. Exclusive. Right? Biladi means exclusive, right? Think of it in the sense of without, right? Without me, without you, something is exclusive. It's without other things. So that's where this word also pops up, but that's also where it will also show. If there's time, I would like to understand the difference between biladech and biladaich. There isn't much of a difference. They both mean without you, singular feminine. Great question. Where's our word up here? Biladecha is without you, masculine. There are some people who say that it's actually correct to say one versus the other. Some people will say it's modern versus older Hebrew. I will tell you that biladech is the one you're going to hear more. Why? Go back to my aesthetic rule of thumb. Biladech, biladayich. Biladayich sounds a little bit more poetic and older. However, it's 4 syllables. Biladech is only 3 syllables. The 3-syllable word will always win over the 4-syllable word. That's the major difference. Okay. What is the difference between bishvil and le? How would you know when to use either of the two? That le means for and bishvil also means for. That's a great question. The best way I can tell you this answer is trial and error. Most of the time, you're not going to use the word bishvil. Right? You're going, unless you're really emphasizing the fact that it's for me, right? For me, bishvili, אני לא אוהב את הקיץ. בשבילי, הלחות היא בלתי נסבלת. For me, the humidity is intolerable. Right? When the emphasis is on the for me as opposed to for you or for someone else, then you're going to use bishvil. But if you're just talking in everyday language, the le is going to come up more. For example, here's a great example that actually all these verbs are going to end up taking the prefix le as the preposition. אפשר לפתוח לי את הארגז? Can you open the box for me? אפשר לפתוח לי את הדלת? Can you open for me the door? You're not going to say בשביל here. You're going to use the preposition le. Okay? The rule of thumb I'm going to tell you is most of the time it's going to be the prefix le and not bishvil. When do you use bli versus lilo? This is one we get all the time. Bli and lilo is also trial and error, and you're going to see how it works. Other people using it. Lilo usually think of as non or free, right? For example, the slogan of Tel Aviv's municipality is Ir lelo hafsaka. Ir, city, lelo hafsaka. Hafsaka is a stop or a pause, right? So it translates as non-stop city. Okay. Lelo in that case is none. Bli wouldn't translate as none there. So what I'm trying to say here is lilo is more flexible in how we translate it. It could be dash free, it could be non-dash, or it could be without. Bli, you're not going to hear as often. It's not that they both don't mean the same thing without. It's just simply lilo you're going to hear more. Okay. Sorry, skipping all over the place. In what context would you use etzli instead of et? Only in very rare circumstances, like etzli babait yesh nezila. Here at home, there's a leak, right? In a physical sense. Et is with me. You wouldn't say the same thing with et. It doesn't work. Okay? But etzli is at home or at my place versus et with me. Your fever will go away betoch shavua or bishavua. Great question. Your fever will go away within a week. Achom yalem betoch shavua. Within a week. Betoch shavua. In a week. So there's a difference between in and within, right? If I say your fever will go away betoch shavua, I'm saying within a week, meaning within 7 days' time. Some period of that 7 days, it will go away. If I say your fever will go away bishavua, it means in a full week, it'll go away. It's the difference between within and in, just like in English, is the difference there. Great question. Can mul also mean opposite something? Ken, ani omed mul hayam. I am opposite the sea, or I'm standing opposite the sea, facing the sea. It means opposite in the sense of facing or towards, right? I'm looking towards something, I'm looking in that respect. When should we use me and me as a prefix? I can't seem to find this explanation. Thanks in advance. So let's go back here. Me, from. Ani yotze mehamisrad. Let me give you a sample sentence right now. Ani yotze mehamisrad. Achshav. I'm leaving the office now. Okay, ani, I, yotze, leaving. Me is that me here, that prefix, from the office. Misrad, achshav. Now, this is where you're going to use the prefix me. Ani yotze meha misrad achshav. Okay, great question. When using the term al and you want to say meaning on, about, or this one, I'm assuming, or el, it's the same question, and you want to say to me, do you use one yod or two yod? It's a great question. Okay, so you're going to see here, one has two yods and one has one yod. The rule in Hebrew is as follows, and we have a whole lesson about voweling in Hebrew, and highly recommend watching it in general, also because it makes you go over our playlist over on YouTube. Both of these are considered correct because I put the vowels in. If the vowels were not there, right? This is how you would write it without vowels. when you don't use vowels, the nikud, and in Hebrew, you don't normally write in the dots and bars indicating vowel sounds. They're only as helpers. You put in the extra yud here to indicate that we pronounce this as elai, and this one as alai. Okay, this is alai, this is elai. Okay, and you'll know that because of the two yuds and the letter at the beginning. If I took that out, I don't know if this word is Eli, my God, or Eli, to me. Okay, just like if I took out the yud here, this could be three different things. It could be the Hebrew name Eli, it could be the Arabic name Ali, or it could be Alai. To further specify it in Hebrew, we add that extra yud. Alai, Eli. If I was to write in the vowels like they were before, then I could get away with just one yud. And in fact, the automatic nikud generator that I use, you have to specify to put in that extra yud. And I make sure that's there because in everyday spelling, you will see it as two yuds. Great question. What about biglal? We covered that in conjunctions. In modern Hebrew, how do we conjugate im? We went over that, right? Iti, itra, ito, and so forth. Why is im, itra, and not imcha? That's a function of modern Hebrew. It's just one of those things you got to learn. That's what it is. In biblical Hebrew and prayer Hebrew, you will say imi, meaning with me, but in modern Hebrew, it's iti. Iti, itra, itach, ito, ita, itanu, itchem, itchem, itam, itan. Can you do a lesson for et just when I think I got a grasp on it? I literally don't. I absolutely will, but please remind me by writing us an email. I would love to do a thing on et once again, on objects in general, direct and indirect. But et is used before a direct object. When do you use chayav or alai, as in the English I must? So we had a class a couple weeks ago about non-gendered communication, and you can look that up on YouTube. And a lot of the sentences were using the word in English must or should or things like that. And then we used both al and chayav in a non-gendered sense, but meaning must. So definitely recommend reviewing that lesson. Hu holech lebank. He goes to the bank. Someone's asking, le seemed like a direction, so a bit confused. It is, right? Le is two or four. Remember, it means both two or four. Hu holech lebank. Lalechet is always followed by the prepositional prefix le. It just is. I didn't put that in this list. There are obviously many other verbs I didn't include in this list down here. But lalechet, to go, is always followed by the prefix le, to. Okay. In English, we can also get away with sending a message instead of I am sending a message to you. Can you get away with things like that in Hebrew? No. In Hebrew, like other languages, the verb to send is followed by the preposition to. You can say, if I'm simply saying I am sending a message, ani sholeach hoda, I am sending a message. That's an incomplete thought, but it's not an incomplete sentence. It's a complete sentence. I am sending a message. There's more details I'd like to know. You don't just send a message. You send a message to someone. That's missing in this context, but it's otherwise a perfectly all right sentence. Shouldn't the name of the airline be something other than El Al? El Al is from the Bible. The name of Israel's national airline, El Al, is a term from the Bible, and it means upwards. Okay, think of it more like an idiom rather than a literal translation, but it's from the Bible, and that's where it was from, the idea of soaring upwards. Why may you not use the conjugation of et when saying I miss you? I explained that pretty easily. It's incorrect in Hebrew. The verb to miss is always followed by the preposition el. You cannot apply one language's rules onto another. And that's why I specifically included this list of verbs. In English, it's considered a direct object. In Hebrew, it is not. Ani mitgager elecha, I miss you. Full stop, no other um, uh, exceptions there, unless you're saying someone's name, but you're not here, right? You're saying, I miss you. Someone keeps asking, it's written right here. How do you say with me is et, full stop. Modern Hebrew, et, with me, itcha, with you. That's how it's conjugated. Sorry if that was confusing. Can to buy also be followed by bishvil instead of le? You can get away with bishvil. Folks, get away with from bishvil. Again, remember what I just said before, and I'm going to take off the camera so you can watch my hands again. Bishvil le. Remember the rule. It's a very important rule. In Hebrew, when you can use fewer syllables and fewer letters to say the exact same thing, you're always going to do that. Bishvil, I know sounds better to you because you've learned that as exclusively meaning for. And le is confusing because it can mean both to and for. However, bishvil and le. Le is always going to win in the event of two syllables versus one. One syllable will always win. Okay, great question. Ani nosea le Tel Aviv. The verb linsoa, to travel, is followed by the prepositional prefix le. This is quickly turning into a dictionary questions here. I see a lot of people asking questions how to translate certain things. That's not what this is used for, and unfortunately, we're way out of time for that. Are there rules for prepositions, or is it a matter of avoiding translating English to Hebrew and memorizing the correct preposition? Memorizing the correct preposition. That's the case in most languages. You need to learn which verb does it. And when you learn verbs in a formal setting with learning modern Hebrew, you will learn the corresponding preposition, just like you do in other languages. We being a supplement to your existing or ongoing Hebrew education are trying to explain that to you as well. But yes. Okay, we have a lot of questions here. I'm really trying to get through as many as I can, folks, in the Q&A, and thank you so much for writing them, but I'm really trying to do some triage as we're way over time here. Okay, I'm sorry, we're really out of time. I see we have a lot more questions. I'd love to be able to answer more of them. Here's again, if you're still in the call and I didn't answer your questions, write to us. Really simple. Email us, hebrew@nbn.org.il. You'll also get a copy of this lesson. You'll be able to review it. We'll clearly go over these topics again in the near future because they bring up a lot of questions, which we're really excited about. But unfortunately, we're just out of too much time here. Until next time we meet, whether you join us for our conversation class on Wednesday or next week's Monday class, toda rabah, thank you all, and lihitrot. See you all very soon.